Welcome everybody to the fifth in Think Like a Winner. As we've been pointing out, if you can learn how to think like the people who've succeeded greatly in life, you can have the same kind of results that they had too. You know, we've all seen the movie, or you know the movie, The Matrix. And in there, the theme of the movie is that we're really all plugged into a computer, and by just plugging in how to fly a helicopter, someone with no experience whatsoever will be able to fly a helicopter or fight a jet or do brain surgery or anything like that. And even though that's a fiction, there is a reality to that, and that's what we're talking about here today. That if you can train your mind to think in ways that the great people who succeeded wonderfully in life thought, you can have exactly the same success as them. There is no such thing as a magic guru. Steve Jobs wasn't born with a computer chip in his mouth, or Warren Buffett wasn't picking out stocks in the crib. They all learned how to think in ways that gave them great success, and you can do exactly the same thing as well. So today's theme is inspiration. The problems are not the problems. The obstacles you have in life are not the obstacles. If you have great inspiration, you can overcome them all. And we have, and I'd like to point out a fascinating idea. That if you picture for a moment you're sitting on your deathbed, 120 years old, please God, and you look back over your life of wonderful achievements and wonderful relationships and friendships and success and everything, right? And I'm there. And I'm going to ask you two questions, and I'm going to answer both questions for you. I hate when people do that. The first question is, what's the most difficult thing you ever did your entire life? The most difficult thing you ever did your entire life. And the second question I'm going to ask you is, what's the best thing you did your entire life? Now, standing here right now, not on your deathbed, I'm going to answer those two questions. The most difficult thing you already did, and the best thing is yet to come. We're looking forward to better than we've ever experienced. That's what we're looking forward to. So the most difficult thing you ever done probably is one of those things you've already done, which is learning to read and write, amongst many of the things that we've already done. If you got married, if you have children, if you have started a business, a career, those are amongst the most difficult things a human being will ever do. To go from illiterate to literate is giant leaps. It's just everybody does it, or everyone we know does it, and it's so ubiquitous, it's so common that we don't think it's such a big deal. But the truth of the matter is one of the most difficult things we'll ever do. Right? The best thing we're ever going to do is yet to come. Now, I want to make a point. You have never been smarter. You have never been smarter than you are right now. Right? You've never had more ideas, more concepts, more understanding, more experience than you are right now. So you did the most difficult thing when you were, relatively speaking, stupid. Nothing personal. I was just as stupid, if not worse, right? But you did the most difficult thing when you were stupid. And you're going to do the best thing when you're smart. Therefore, what? The future is a piece of cake, a piece of cake. Now, one of the things that enabled you to achieve reading or writing is you were inspired. And I'll give you this story, and there's many stories. There's an example that throughout history, and you probably know some personal ones too. In 1954, Roger Bannister became the first person to ever run the mile in under 4 minutes in recorded history. In almost 100 years of them recording this, he became the first person to do it. They were trying for close to 100 years. Some people said it's physically impossible. Now, that in itself is no small thing, right? It was a really big news story in the world at that time. What is incredible is a story that sort of slips out under, that most people don't know, is who's the second person to run the 4-minute mile. Now, if it took 100 years to Roger Bannister to figure it out, I would have expected the next guy to do it, when I looked into this, to be, a few years, right? Because you've got to study Roger Bannister's food regimen, his exercise program, things like that. What did he do? His running shoes, what did he do that he got the edge and managed to do it, right? But it wasn't true at all. The next guy to do it did it in 6 weeks, and he ran faster than Roger Bannister. Within 1 year, Roger Bannister retires from running, and people are running faster than him. I actually met somebody who did it in high school, the 4-minute mile in high school. Now, how is that possible? Within 6 weeks, John Landy from New Zealand beats Roger Bannister's time. Now, I want to make another point, and that is, if you'd gone to John Landy or any one of those runners who did it within that year and said to them, you can do the 4-minute mile, they would have attested with absolute certainty and conviction that they couldn't run faster than they're running. They're pushing it to the limit. There's no more. It gives you a sense of how fast the 4-minute mile is. If you have a home treadmill, most home treadmills, the top speed is 12 miles an hour. That's most home treadmills. If you have a professional one, it's different. But most home treadmills, top speed, right? Turn that on at top speed, and you'll get an idea. To run the 4-minute mile, you've got to run an average speed of 15 miles an hour. Right? You're really pushing the limit there, 15 miles an hour. Right? The world record today, which is something like 70 years later, is only 15 seconds faster than Roger Bannister did it in 1954. So you really, every second really counts in that program, right? In that effort. So the question is, right? Not how Roger Bannister did. That's an interesting question. The question is, how did John Landy do it? And John Landy did it because Roger Bannister inspired him. If you have inspiration, there's like the obstacles fade away. They're not issues anymore. If I could inspire you, I can't, but if I could inspire you, that if you built a pyramid, you'd never die. I don't know how the guy who came up with that idea did it. Right? I don't think anybody today knows, but I definitely do not know. But if you knew how to do it, and if I could convince you that if we built one of those pyramids, we would never die, right? We would get it done. In other words, the problem isn't, we don't know how they built the pyramids. They're engineering feats that just boggle the mind. But the reason we don't know is because we don't know how one of those things, if you built them, you'd never die. If you could convince people of that, now this concept is not as distant as you might conceive of. And I'll give you 2 examples. Coca-Cola, a few years ago, this is a few years, the numbers are old, but they're very similar today. Coca-Cola grossed $23.104 billion, right? Coca-Cola was $23 billion, right? Pepsi grossed $32.5 billion. That's almost $9.5 billion, more $9.4 billion, right? More than Coca-Cola. So you think Pepsi's doing better, but listen to the numbers, right? Coca-Cola's net earnings are $4.872 billion, right? $4.5 billion. And Pepsi's net earnings are $4.078 billion. In other words, right, Coca-Cola is grossing $23 billion on almost $1 billion less than Pepsi. In other words, Pepsi has to as a percentage of their earnings, are earning a lot less. Coca-Cola is making a lot more money on spending a lot less money. I don't know if that's making sense. I've got a lot of confusing numbers. In other words, Coca-Cola is for almost the same amount of money, right? Coca-Cola is raking in a lot more money. They're making a lot of money. And why is that? Because Coca-Cola inspires. Right? You've seen those adverts of Coca-Cola, right? I like to buy the world of Coke. Right? The same thing is true with Apple. Apple's share of the smartphone industry, right, is 92%. They make 92% of all the cell phones in the world. Apple gets 92% of the profits, but they only sell 20% of the phones. Meaning that the other 80% of the phones have to share 8% of the profits. Now, the other phones, for instance, Samsung makes most of Apple phones. Apple doesn't actually make their own phones. And the technology that's into Apple is the same and sometimes and oftentimes better than other phones. It's just people buy Apple because they're inspired. And when you're inspired, you make a lot more money. I'm not saying that's the only motivation you should have, but I'm just giving you an actual example of if you can inspire people, if somehow you can inspire people, that if you buy this drink, right, if you buy this drink, you'll live longer. If you wear this, if you have this phone, you'll be cooler. If you can inspire people to that, you're going to succeed greatly. That's the power of inspiration. I'm not saying it's just for using it for marketing purposes. I'm saying it for the purposes of our own lives. If we can tap into inspiration, we can figure it out, right? We can crack this code and inspire ourselves. Right? We're powerhouse. How do you do it? So it's not going to come from sitting around smelling daisies and pondering rainbows. How most people think you get inspiration. That's not how you do it. When you think about your job, your job isn't to make your life easier. Your job is to solve the impossible. You see, when you think of things that are impossible, that's where you find inspiration, the Roger Bannister. It's in the things that are impossible. Whatever you have to do in life, focus on the impossible. Those are the places where we're going to start to find the inspiration. Now, I want to give you really 6 examples, and 3 and 3. Winston Churchill, J.K. Rowling, Marie Curie. Right, those are the first 3. Remarkable people, inspiring people who did incredible things. Okay, fine. Right, writing books, writing novels is not exactly saving mankind, but nevertheless, it's a remarkable achievement. Okay, but now take the next 3: Helen Keller, Steve Jobs, Maya Angelou. Right, the difference between those first 3 and the second 3 is they all 6 of them did inspiring things with their lives. But the second 3 went through incredible difficulty to get there. Right? Helen Keller, Steve Jobs, and Maya Angelou. Right? Their background, I don't want to go into it now. You can all research it on Google. But their lives were real. They grew up in very difficult circumstances and overcame those things. The first group, Winston Churchill, J.K. Rowling, Marie Curie, did not. And the point is this: everyone's going through their own tragedy. In other words, all 6 of them really had tragic, difficult lives in their own personal ways that they had to overcome. And that's where they got their inspiration. In other words, your life may not be as difficult as Helen Keller, but it's difficult. And my life too. Everyone's life. Everyone's got the 4-minute mile in front of them, right? And that's where we get inspired. Winners get inspired by failure. This is a key point, right? You'll always succeed when failure is certain, not when it's a possibility. In other words, what motivates people and inspires them is when they have no choice. There's a great, the Rambam, Maimonides says this, right? Never surround your enemy on four sides. Right? Never surround your enemy on four sides. Something that actually is very interesting. The Israelis have messed up quite a few times, right? Gaza Strip is one example. Like, never surround, Beirut is another. If you remember Lebanon, Beirut, big disaster. Never surround your enemy on four sides. And it's not because you want them to escape. It's because when you do that, you turn your enemy, you inspire your enemy, and you don't want that, right? It's very interesting. Sun Tzu, the writer of The Art of War, he says the opposite. It's a very interesting thing. He says the opposite. He says, if you want to win, put your army in a place where they're surrounded on four sides, which he did. He was the general of his army, and he made himself entrapped by his enemy, which was a big mistake, because now his soldiers fought with incredible force, and they won, right? Never surround your enemy on four sides. And I'll give you an example. It's a terrible example, but I think we can all relate to it. If, God forbid, right, somebody's coming home and they drive up to their house and it's a flame, and they run out of the car, dash to the front door, right? The fire chief tackles them. He says, "You crazy, you can't go in there." And the man says, "You don't," and the man or woman says, "You don't understand, my baby's on the second floor." That parent is going to do something that a fire chief that's highly trained will not do and cannot do. And that parent's going to be successful. Because when you are inspired, when you meet something that you have to do, you're going to find inspiration. What you feel like doing, you won't find inspiration in what you feel like doing. You won't find it in what you like to do. Not even what you can do. These are things that are really irrelevant. What you have to focus on is what you have to do. We've all got things like that in our lives. These are the things that you have to do. When you focus on the places where you have to win, that's where you're going to find inspiration. As long as you think you have a choice, you will fail. You will always succeed. So you will only succeed when failure is not a possibility. And you will always fail when it is. When you have no choice, you are going to succeed. In fact, Golda Meir says a very similar thing. She said the reason why the Israel, I don't personally buy this as the reason, but I do credit her for thinking like this. She says the reason why the Israelis win every war is because they have a secret weapon. It's called the Mediterranean Sea. But as what she means, they have no choice. They have to win. I personally don't think that's I don't think that explains it. But I think God had a big hand in this. But nevertheless, she understands this concept. Okay, so what's the problem here? So if you look at the world, you see a remarkable thing. Every single thing on this planet, every single animal, bug, everything has with it two things: the desire for what it wants and the tools to get it. Lions have these big teeth, big claws, perfect for catching gazelles. Monkeys have these long arms and tails, perfect for climbing trees. Elephants, giraffes, everything. In other words, if you take the teeth out of a lion, it isn't going to start climbing trees to eat bananas, right? It's made to, it wants gazelles, it's made to catch them, the monkeys, you take all the banana trees, right? They could chase the gazelles, but that's about as far as it would go. Where everything is designed perfectly to achieve what it does, and it does it perfectly, right? Monkeys don't have to practice on the weekends their swing, right? Eagles, 50 foot up, first fly out of the nest, boom, they do it. No practice, no thinking, no nothing. They got it down pat, and they do it perfectly every single time. Human beings are born incompetent. Nothing personal. Some of my best friends are human beings, but we are born incompetent. There is nothing a human being does well, right? And everything we have to do, we have to learn how to do it, right? It takes us 1 year to learn how to walk. I mean, for crying out loud, how difficult is it, right? Deer. Right? I mean, deer, nothing against deer, but they're not the smartest of all the creatures out there. Right? But within a few minutes, they're walking around. I mean, if a deer can figure it out, how come my kids can't figure it out? There's one thing that human beings do, but there is an exception. There's one thing that human beings do par excellence, better than anything else. We are perfect at it. Nothing can compare. And that is failure. We fail like nobody's business. And using that, we can get our inspiration. This is a quote from Sarah Blakely. Sarah Blakely was the youngest self-made female billionaire. I don't want to sound sexist or anything, but the reality is it's a lot harder for women to become billionaires. Millionaires, okay, piece of cake. Joking, right? But billionaires, that's tough, right? That's tough. She became the first. She created Spanx. If you don't know what Spanx is, I'm not going to tell you, right? So they asked her, like, what's your secret, right? And what did she say? It's how you think. She didn't actually use these words, but it's how she thought about her life, how she thought about the problems going on. How you think is what's going to make your success. Right? So how did she think? So she explained her father was a student of Wayne Dwyer, and he had a philosophy that failure is a greater educator than success. And so she would say, her father would say to her when she came home from school, what did you fail at today? And if she didn't have anything, he was disappointed. If you didn't fail, it means you didn't try. Human beings don't do anything well. We're not eagles. We're not monkeys. We're not dolphins. We only succeed through failure. We try, get up, walk, fall over, get up, walk, fall over, get up, and then we get it. Right? Riding a bicycle, every single day. There's nothing a human being does without failure. So if you didn't fail today, you're not trying anything new today. Right? That's how you think. She thought like that. In other words, if you want to succeed greatly in life, you have to be willing, you have to want failure. Right? Now I'm going to give you, remember, it's how you think. This is a quote from Warren Buffett. And now it's confession time. It should be noted that no consultant, board of directors, or investment banker pushed me into the mistakes I would describe. In tennis parlance, they were all unforced errors. The only explanation is that my brain had gone on vacation and forgot to notify me. My behavior resembled that of a politician Molly Ivins once described. If his IQ was any lower, you would have to water him twice a day. This is Warren Buffett's annual letter to the shareholders, right, which is an interesting read. It's a very long, and you can download it, and it's spattered with these comical little things that Warren sticks in there. Very insightful. Sometimes very insightful stuff. But he's writing this letter. This is a guy that could hide behind all kinds of excuses and no one would say boo. But he doesn't do that. Not because, he's gregarious and, simple-minded or God forbid anything like that, right? It's because he understands the value of failure. He isn't afraid of failure. He loves failure. Failure is the thing that forces him to succeed. You see, in the Western world, we have this image that failure is this way and success is that way, right? It's like the ledger, we have the debits and the credits, and that's true, right? But the reality is failure and success are pointing in the same direction. They are part of success. And when you can appreciate failure, when you can look at your failures, when you can hold them dear and study them and think about them and not run away from them, that's where you're going to find your inspiration. It's out of those that you're going to grow. You see, we can only... let me give you another example, right? The first people that figured out how to fly a plane, right? The Wright brothers. So what happened? They weren't the most sophisticated in terms of technology. There were other groups working it. The United States Navy had a prize for the first people who could do it. There were other groups doing it, but they were the ones that made it happen. Yes, they had some background in bicycles and things like that, but they were the ones that pushed beyond. Because why? They took their failures and learned from them. If you take your failures and use that to inspire you to add on, to figure a way through that, you're then going beyond everybody else. You have the competitive advantage because your failures are where your educational system, wherever you came out of, take you to. You've got as far as that. And that's a tremendous amount of success. But if you want to achieve greater, if you want to succeed more than that, if you want to do great things in whatever sphere of life, whether it's family, whether it's relationships, whether it's business, whatever it happens to be, then you have to take that limit that you got to and then run with it. Use those failures as a springboard to great inspiration, because that's where you're going to find it, in the things that you have to overcome. And instead of denying, instead of running away from failure, which society so much emphasizes today, when you look at your failures and appreciate them, that's where you're going to find great success. Failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is the prerequisite. Thank you very much. I hope these sessions have been helpful for you. This is Think Like a Winner. I'm Rabbi Stephen Baars.